I do know this. This is true. Northwestern is one of my favorite places in the world. And the time I spent here was truly the most magical, meaningful, transformative time in my life. And I still miss it. And I still think about it all the time. And this is very sad for a 45-year-old man to admit. But honestly, I would literally live in Shanley if I could. Still, I would. I really would. And that is sad but true. My parents were not in entertainment in any way. Now, I've heard that these days, occasionally, there are kids with famous parents who go to Northwestern. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not someone who's overly critical about Nepo babies or any of that. In fact, if any of you have famous or powerful parents in Hollywood, please put in a good word for me and tell them that I am looking for work. But my parents were very middle-class people with their average 9-to-5 jobs, and they had nothing to do with the entertainment industry. So I wasn't starting out with any major Hollywood connections or anything even close to that. I think my father was still paying off all the money he borrowed to send me to Northwestern until the day he died. That's true. And I was only able to finally pay off all my student loans when I got on TV, when I was in my 30s. But okay, since we are here, how did I end up making it in entertainment and the media? Number one, and I know it's a cliche, and I wrote this very much thinking about you guys here, and I'm glad you're all listening, but this is really for you. I know it's a cliche, but it's true. Perseverance. I was persistent. I really stuck with it no matter what. And trust me, there were some very tough times and so many close calls over the years which didn't pan out, where I thought it was going to happen and that it didn't. You know, when someone I trust even told me, this is your moment, it's going to happen, your life's about to change. And then 2 weeks later, it hadn't changed because something disappointing or even crushing had happened. A live show didn't go the way that I thought it would go. A TV pilot didn't get picked up. A movie that I poured my heart and soul into that I thought would do well didn't. That happened and continues to happen over and over again. And I'm like anyone else. I have major moments of self-doubt and worry and sadness and insecurity and wondering, is it ever going to happen for me the way I envisioned it? And I still have those moments all the time when I get rejected and it doesn't go the way I thought it was going to go and no one's calling to work with me. But, and this is the key, underneath all of that anxiety, I have always deep down from the second I graduated from here until right now, I have always had a voice in my head and a gut feeling, and sometimes it is harder to locate than others, but ultimately it is always there. And it's a voice and a feeling in my gut that says, keep going. You're smart. You went to Northwestern. Figure out a smarter way to do it, a more clever way to do it. And then I sit down and do the work and try to make it happen. I remember when I was first starting out as an actor in New York City, right after I graduated, being on the end of a line of what felt like hundreds or thousands of other actors trying out for one role in a play. And I remember looking around and thinking, I bet a lot of these actors are talented, and a lot of them were very good looking. And I thought to myself, I am never going to be the one actor chosen for the one role out of the hundreds of actors here. At least that's what I thought. There has to be a smarter way of doing this. There has to be a different way for me to break in. I've got to be more clever than this. I've got to write something. I've got to create something for myself, some way, somehow. And I did do that, but that took time. It took years. But if you want it badly enough, you have to hang in there. I made my first Billy on the Street video in 2004, 20 years ago, to project onto a small screen during a live sketch comedy show I was doing in New York at tiny little theaters and on tiny stages in the back of bars in the East Village and odd little cabaret spaces before YouTube even existed. And sometimes there were like 4 people in the audience. But even if there were 4 people watching, I always worked really, really hard on the show. I always treated it like I was shooting my Netflix comedy special that night. That's how seriously I took it. Even if there were 4 people in the audience, I prepared for every show and performed as if there were 25,000 people watching in Madison Square Garden. And those videos didn't start getting attention until 6 years after I started making them. And then it was another year after that I was finally able to sell a TV show in 2011. That's about 11 or 12 years after graduation. That is not a short amount of time. But I hung in there because I really wanted it. And that's how it's always been for me. I have always had to rely on my own creative ideas, my own work ethic, and, as Orly said, the love and support of my very talented friends to help me create a space for myself in an industry and a world where even being slightly unconventional can mean that not everyone gets you or is rooting for you. There is something in the theater department here called Showcase. I think they still do this. They know. I'm still thinking about it. I'm 45. Okay? Showcase is where the theater faculty here chose about 10 theater students and 10 musical theater students, and those students got to go to New York before we graduated and audition for agents and managers in New York, and I desperately wanted to be one of those students chosen, and I auditioned, and I wasn't chosen. Still here giving the graduation speech, though, 25 years later. But I had some really talented friends, and they were chosen. And they all went to New York, and I think almost all of them got agents or managers or something. And then when we all moved to New York a month later to start our lives and our careers, they all had agents immediately, sending them out for auditions, and I had nothing. And then a year later, friends of mine from Northwestern cast me in a small off-Broadway musical in New York. It was an original show that we had done here in Shanley, and which they had gotten financing for to do a very small off-Broadway run in New York. And when we had done it at Northwestern, everybody loved it and really loved me in it. And when we went and did it in the real world in New York, everybody hated it. And a critic from the New York Times came to review the show, and I thought, okay, well, if the critic in the New York Times likes me, I'll at least probably get an agent out of it, which I wanted so badly. And the critic from the New York Times hated the show. And about me, all he said was, Mr. Eichner sings and dances bravely, but not well. And I cannot express too strongly enough, I really thought that was it for me. I really thought that was my one chance. But I kept going. Even though once again it became very clear to me that the traditional paths to success in my industry, getting an agent, going to auditions, getting chosen for Showcase. I'm still not bitter about that at all. That those traditional paths weren't going to work for me because it never did, and it never really has, and it still doesn't. And even now, 25 years into my career, and I've been lucky and I've done well, but I still have to hustle. I still have to hustle sometimes like you wouldn't believe. And I still have to give myself almost daily pep talks to not drown in self-pity and not dwell on all the sadness and rejection and the criticism, and to just keep going and try to think of a new thing. But even then, back in the day, I knew I couldn't wait around for someone else to come and choose me and save me and make my dreams come true. I had to do it, or at least try to do it, for myself. And so I eventually started writing a live comedy show, a sketch comedy show. And it was in that show that we all did together where I developed this character, this persona that years later became known as Billy on the Street. This character who is irrationally angry and panicked about pop culture and entertainment, which led to those videos, which became the way I got noticed and finally did get agents, managers, etc. And as I said before, even then, it didn't happen right away. It still took years after that, and I had to stick with it and just keep doing it all, doing the live shows, doing the videos, putting myself out there, putting myself online, putting my work on YouTube so that someone I've never met who doesn't understand satire could leave a comment saying I was talentless and irritating. But that at least put me on the track, which years later led to me getting a TV show and finally being able to pay my bills and really make a living as an actor, writer, producer. And it didn't start with an agent or a manager getting me a job. It didn't matter if I once got a bad review. The same New York Times, which didn't like me in that off-Broadway musical 4 years later, was writing long stories about how phenomenal I was. And that's why I say, nobody knows a damn thing about how it's going to turn out for you. No one. Don't let anyone tell you how your story ends, and a lot of people are experts out there, but nobody knows. Trust me, that's for you to figure out. I know that obviously what happened to me won't be exactly what happens to you, of course, but I hope that hearing how I got started and overcame certain obstacles in those years right after I graduated is helpful, and that there's something you can take from it and apply to your own adventure that you're about to go on. And it is an adventure. I will leave you with this very quick anecdote about something that happened to me right after I graduated. I was desperate for a job, and a lot of my actor friends I had graduated with from here were all waiting tables at a fancy restaurant in Tribeca in Manhattan and making pretty good money. So I got a job waiting tables there. But it takes a very special type of person to be able to wait tables successfully at a busy restaurant in Manhattan. And I could not wait tables for my life. I was okay at bartending eventually, but I was a terrible waiter. I could not handle the customers, dealing with the money. My brain just couldn't do it. And I tried doing it for a couple of days, and I went home, and I was living with three roommates at the time, all of whom went to Northwestern with me. And I remember I came home, I slid down onto the floor of our tiny, weird, incredibly narrow living room in New York. And I just had a complete meltdown. And this wasn't even about me not being a successful actor. I wasn't even a successful waiter. And there is a chance that something like that at some point might happen to you. It might happen a few times even. So when you are on the floor of your cramped New York apartment or LA apartment or Chicago apartment or wherever you are, and your brain is fried, and you are having a meltdown because your day job is stressful and exhausting, and you're not doing what you want in your life, and you are getting rejected left and right, I want you to just remember me saying to you right now, Billy Eichner told me to just hang in there and be persistent and make my own work and work with my smart and talented friends and work really fucking hard, and eventually it will all figure itself out and everything will be okay. Actually, it will be better than okay. Everything will be great. And your roommate will say to you, "Who's Billy Eichner?" And you're going to say, "He's that guy that shouts at people on TikTok." And your roommate will say, "Oh yeah, I've seen that guy. They let him speak at your graduation?" Again, I'm so flattered to be here. It is really one of the most flattering things I've ever been asked to do, and certainly one of the most meaningful. I would not be who I am today in any way if I had not gone to this school, had not been a theater person here like you guys, had not had Mary Poole, and had not made the friends I was lucky enough to make, so thank you for having me. And when you do come up with your own great ideas, please consider casting me because I need a job. Thank you so much. And congratulations.
Thank you, Billy.